What does a speed rating of a disc really mean, and what the heck is high-speed turn? These are two key elements that determine the flight characteristics of a disc, and I'm going to try to help clear up some confusion for you right after this quick intro. So I tackled the last two flight numbers in my previous cheat code video, which you may find helpful to watch after this one. I think the flight numbers could be switched around to more closely match how my brain perceives the flight of the disc. I really think the order should be speed, turn, glide, and then fade. And here's the reason. Number one, speed is a factor of the disc shape, primarily the rim width, and it sets the stage for the remaining characteristics. So it definitely needs to be first to help classify what types of discs, putter, mid-range, driver, etc. Here we have a putter. It's a big old blocky blunt nose that's going to push through the wind like a barge going upriver. Compare that to a high-speed driver, which is as thin as possible with a very wide rim to cut through the air like a knife. I'm pretty sure I just mixed my metaphors, but hopefully you get it. So the disc shape determines the speed potential of the disc, and it also sets what speed the disc wants to be thrown to achieve its ideal flight. Now more about ideal flight in a minute. So I agree, speed should be the base, should be number one. And then the other factors are going to pile in on top. And I get why glide is the next in the numbers, but I prefer to have turn be the next one. So number two, I'm going to have turn or high speed turn because it starts to influence the flight right at the beginning of the throw, when the speed and the torque are at its highest.
I bet it's gonna go so far. 3, 2, 1. Three, two, one.
Do a barrel roll. Do a barrel roll.
My very shallow understanding is that discs flipping over is a fundamental behavior. I'm using discs that don't want to flip over, but they're not designed for the speeds that I'm going, and they're still wanting to flip.
There's some physics and gyrational stuff that's going on here that you and I don't have to understand. All we need to know is that the faster a disc is thrown, the more it wants to turn over or flip in the initial part of its flight. A quick memory tool for you is speed flips. The speed rating of the disc and the speed of your throw is going to affect the amount of turn that will then tag team with glide and hold it in the air as long as possible before allowing fade to bring it crashing back to earth. All right, let's jump in and talk about speed. And whatever you do, don't drop below 55 miles per hour. Now that corny dad joke can actually help us to think about speed, and not the movie with Keanu, but the disc speed. Boy, that was sad. I'm sorry, I apologize. Okay, every disc has a minimum speed that it wants to reach in order to achieve its ideal flight. And ideal, that's the key word is being ideal, and that's how the disc was intended to fly. The ideal flight of a putter is intended to be solid, dependable, and no nonsense. It's a point and shoot disc. It's not going all over the place. It's doing that. A mid-range, mid-range is adding a little more speed and distance, but you're still counting on it being very controllable and consistent in its flight. Fairway drivers are trading a little more control for speed, but they're not getting too crazy, for the most part. And then finally, distance drivers are aiming for the max speed that they can make while still maintaining as much control as they can. And they actually are controllable as long as you throw them correctly. But they have so much less room for error if you don't throw them right. That's what makes them hard. You've got to throw them correctly. Let me try to illustrate this. I'm representing the disc and its speed rating as a surfboard, and the wave is the power speed needed. A one speed is a big floaty thing, and it doesn't need a lot of wave or power to move it along. It's fun in a safe way, but not exciting. And that's the goal. We're more interested in consistently staying afloat over doing tricks. We don't want surprises, we don't want crashes. As the speed ratings increase, the board gets shorter and faster, so it needs more wave to operate correctly. It can go faster, and this lets us start adding on new tricks, but it's also becoming harder to control. So by the time you reach a 14-speed disc, it's like you're on a very slick, tiny board. You can zoom down and across waves, but trouble is always lurking. So you're trading safety and consistency for speed and distance. So even though most of us want to go faster, and we want to be able to pull out the 17-speed Super Mega Chain Obliterator, it would be just like a new surfer grabbing the shortest board he can find and jumping on some big old waves. Sure, it might work out, but chances are very, very low. Wouldn't it be better to throw a disc that matches your arm speed in your game? With the goal of one day reaching a level 17 speed. It's not real. Maybe we'll get there one day. As a side note, do you know what one of the most traded in discs in the past couple of years has been? It's the Innova Boss. And you want to know why? Because you could walk into an academy or other sporting goods store and you could see it on the shelves and stamped right on top, World Distance Record Disc. So as a new player, that sounds exactly like what I want. I need to get the max distant disc to be able to throw the farthest I can. However, what happened when you tried to throw it? It just crashed over into the ground like a bird getting shot in duck hunt. So then you eventually end up trading it for something more throwable, with the motivating goal of one day being able to actually throw that disc fast enough to warrant buying it back. Hey, Pete, hold on. Surely you aren't denying that higher speeds equal more distance. No, I totally agree. But, and there's always a big but right in the middle, faster speed discs have the potential to be thrown farther. But just like riding a small board on a big wave can mean faster and bigger tricks for the pro surfer, it can also mean big trouble for the non-pro. And let's be honest, most of us aren't as good as we think we are, and we need to admit we don't have the speed to throw a lot of the big drivers, especially when you're first starting out. Also, you've got to include nose angle and clean release that are crucial to get a good flight out of faster discs. And the good news is, putters and mid-rangers can absorb a lot of the bad form when we're starting out and still fly pretty well. Think of it like that big surfboard that you can actually almost tap dance on while riding a wave, and it's still going to fly or float pretty well. So if you're developing your game, you're probably going to notice that you're not throwing your faster discs much farther than you're throwing your mid-ranges or your fairway drivers. And this could indicate that you're not getting the right amount of speed that is needed to tap into the faster discs and their ideal flights. This can be for a number of reasons, but the main culprits are going to be physical constraints, getting old like me, incorrect form, or improper release. But that's going to be for another video in the future. Suffice it to say, oftentimes a well-thrown 7-speed T-Bird will outdrive a sloppy 12-speed destroyer. So let's talk about ideal flight and how you can use it to your advantage. When you look at the flight numbers of a disc, it will have a distinct flight path. For instance, let's look at a disc with a 9, 5, -1, 2 flight rating. If you throw that disc at speed it requires, it should look straight right at the beginning and start to turn right, and then eventually fade back to the left and end with a solid finish if you're a right-hand backhand thrower. However, if you throw it below speed, it will not turn as much in the beginning and it will actually fade earlier and fly shorter. Conversely, if you throw above that speed, then you're going to get more high-speed turn and the disc will become more flippy for you. This is why some days your discs feel more stable and then other days they feel more flippy. Your arm release speed is different due to lots of factors. You could be tired, you could be wired, you could have lack of sleep, or you're getting better. Or yesterday you beat the crap out of all your discs. There are lots of reasons. What this means is that the faster a disc is thrown, any disc, the more it will try to turn during that initial high-speed section of the throw. Let's see if this makes sense. Pretend this is a tilt. If I take the tilt, which is one of the most overstable discs, and I'm just making these numbers up, if I throw it at 50 miles an hour, it's just going to crash to the ground. It's just going to die like that. Now, if I'm able to throw it 80 miles an hour, it may actually try to do a little of this before it crashes to the ground. But now if somehow I was able to throw it 150 miles an hour, it could actually start to do this before it crashed to the ground. You see, the faster it goes, the more it's initially going to want to turn. So this explains why some of your disc molds that you thought were very overstable at the beginning of your disc golf journey are now becoming flat or understable. You're growing as a player and you've increased your arm speed and you have a more clean release. You're now throwing discs with faster, more spin and torque, and so you're going to need to adjust your disc molds that you're throwing, or at least adjust how you're throwing those molds to adjust to the extra turn that's coming into your throws. That's actually a good thing. Okay, so let's look at the different flight lines and see how speed combined with high speed turn comes together to dictate the front portion of the flight. For the purposes of this lesson, we're going to use a disc that has a hypothetical minimum speed of 70 miles per hour to reach ideal flight. Okay, when I throw at 70 miles per hour, the flight is ideal, just like the chart shows it. When I throw slower at 60 miles an hour, the flight is shorter and more stable because the high-speed turn is not engaged as much. When I throw faster at 80 miles an hour, the flight is actually longer because it turns more, and because the high-speed turn is engaged even more, it carries out longer before it fades and comes back to the ground. So what this means is that you can dial up or down different flight paths with the exact same disc by speeding it up or slowing it down. I see this get folks in trouble a lot when they try to throw a softer shot, usually for an approach shot. They think the disc is going to act just like it does when they threw a full power shot, but now they're throwing it at half power, and that amount of turn that's normally engaged is not there, and the disc won't flip up as much, and it fades out even faster. I hope some of you are saying, aha, right about now. That explains what's going on to you, and I hope that works. Now, there's also a matter of form and release that may be a little bit different when you slow down, but your disc is actually behaving differently at slower speeds, and you need to keep that in mind. Now, if that isn't enough already, we're going to need to add wind, dang it. So now what if you throw that same disc into a 10-mile-an-hour headwind? Well, it's now going to fly as if you threw it 80 miles an hour because you've got 10 miles an hour this way, 70 going this way. They combine to be 80 miles an hour, and it's going to turn more. Granted, it's not going to fly as far before it fades out, but the initial flip is going to be just like you threw it at 80 miles an hour. Now, with a 10-mile-an-hour tailwind, it's actually going to act like it's a 60-mile-an-hour throw, and it's going to become more overstable. It's going to carry a little bit longer, but it's going to be more stable. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's helping. But since we're already torturing ourselves, let's add one more element: elevation. Elevation, you're throwing uphill, and you've got to get the nose up. This is going to cause drag, and the disc speed is going to be slower, making the flight more overstable, just like a 60-mile-an-hour throw. It's slowing the disc down and causing it to be more stable. The opposite is true when throwing downhill. It will actually cause the disc to speed up and help the disc turn. It's speeding up and wanting to turn more as it's going downhill. So you're trying to make an approach shot at the basket and you're thinking it's going to fade off to the left, and it actually just holds straight or a little right and goes blowing by the basket. I see it all the time. I do it myself. So what does this mean practically? Well, once you understand the interplay of the disc speed and the high speed turn, you can put them to work for you. You can work towards being able to throw faster discs because you're improving your arm speed, but you can also manipulate the disc to fly differently than ideal because you understand how they're trying to fly. Knowledge is power. Let me use a practical scenario, or let me help you figure it out in just a different way. You're wanting to throw a Hyzer-flip tunnel shot, but you're going to need to consider the amount of power that you're going to use to make the shot. If it's a shorter hole, you're not going to throw with as much speed or power, and so the disc is not going to turn as much. which means you could actually miss the tunnel or fade out early at the end. Or perhaps the hole is a longer one, and so you really crank on it. Well, what's going to happen? That extra speed or power is going to flip the disc up more, and you might actually miss the tunnel or have it crank over and turn into a thrower or a roller. I hope the light's going on. Understanding the speed dynamics will help you gauge not only what shot shape, but what disc to throw according to the power that you need. Okay, so here's another example. You just lost your favorite Sexton Firebird in the water, and now you still need to make a super overstable Hyzer shot around a Mando. You don't have your Sexton Firebird, but if you have a high-speed disc, you can throw it below its minimal speed, and it turns into an overstable disc. See, it's not going to flip up. It's going to want to crash back down. You've got a utility disc in a higher speed disc. The only trade-off is this extra big rim could skip a lot, so you might need to keep that in mind, but that's a great trade-off. You lose your Firebird, grab a high-speed disc and use it as an overstable disc. The good news is that you're going to start naturally figuring this out as you form a bond with your disc and you start playing more and more. You're instinctively going to start knowing what disc to throw and when. You see, it's a lot like when I was in language school learning Thai. I had to spell out and figure out every word like I was doing a math problem. The word cat would take me 30 seconds to figure out. I felt like my head was going to explode. But then as I started working on it, it eventually got easier and I could just look at words and know what they were on sight. And that's the same thing that's going to happen with these discs. You're just going to instinctively know, oh, this is the flippy one I want to use for throwing uphill. Understanding the speed and high-speed turn equation in the flight pattern is really going to help you understand how to maneuver and shape your disc shots a lot more. So I guess what I'm saying is understand what's going on with the disc and how the flight numbers work, but then don't get so wrapped up in them that you lose the joy and beauty of just being out there throwing these amazing shots with these great pieces of plastic. Heck, remember, we're throwing frisbees in the woods or in the fields. Man, to be honest, the hardest thing about these videos is trying to wrangle all my thoughts into one cogent package for you. I really could talk about this stuff for hours because this is a game I love. And there are so many tangents and nuances to this stuff that it should give us plenty of stuff to talk about for years to come. Now, having ADHD makes sitting down and working on these scripts an exercise in discipline, but I hope they're really helping you have a little more understanding of what's going on with these discs and how you can grow as a player. I apologize if I ramble, because what's happening is I really just want to give you as much information as I can to help you out. And hopefully we can have a little fun along the way. This one was a little more info than fun, but I hope it helps. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if I've added value to your game. I'm trying to make this channel worth your time and viable for me to keep working on it. And it's getting there, so please tell your friends, because I would greatly appreciate it. Remember, we want to be known more for our love and treatment of others than how much we accomplish in our disc golf game. Our hearts and our souls are more important than our scorecards. So please take care out there, and I hope to see you out on the course.